And we are live now. I'm going to go ahead and hit our intro while we wait and see if anybody joins us from the other show that we were just on. We're going to be talking about sky beasts and stuff.
Ooh.
And um, that is just for JC. That's just so that at now, all these months later, he can stop saying I'm preventing him from doing it.
The truth is out there. Never stop looking. Never be sheep. Always disrupt. We are the ungovernable. We are the truth seekers. We are Sasquatchers.
And we are live and hot off the presses of a supernatural town hall show that I thought was pretty bussin'. That was a pretty good conversation that I was stoked to be part of, especially with the surprise guest that we had, Graham from Gry America. I was not expecting that at all. So this is more or less an after show. Um, we originally had a few people that were scheduled tonight for the typical recording sessions that we do, and it did not work out. So we thought that it would be fun to continue the conversation after the town hall.
Yeah, I mean, we had a great time on that town hall, like we always do. Tuesdays are one of my favorite days of the week, easily. And now we finally get to talk about. We keep calling them sky beasts, but the actual term is atmospheric beasts, right?
Yeah, I am. I'm just not well versed in it, and I I try. I try to be well versed in everything that we talk about and well researched, but there's just not a whole lot of stuff that I bring to the table on this conversation.
I mean, that's kind of standard for you, right? Like, you just never bring a lot to the table, unfortunately.
I know if I could
But
only be better.
if only. So we have, I mean, atmospheric beasts can cover a ton of different things, right? Like we could talk about UAPs, like organic unknown air phenomena, right? And then we can go as far back like to the Crawfordsville monster, which happened in 1891, which was it was like a dragon-like creature that was spotted in Indiana, and the witnesses who had spotted it had reported feeling intense dread while they were outdoors, even before they had seen the creature. Like they just did not feel right, like being outside. And it was described as being pure white in form and had a definite shape of a serpent in the sky. And there was a shroud that had followed it, but they reported that there were fins, like propeller fins, that was pushing it through the sky with a single flaming eye and kind of a wheezing sound that could be heard by the eyewitnesses. So, I mean, I think that's like, if we want to say like one of the oldest modern accounts, because I'm sure we could go back in history and go back to hundreds of different cultures and point out things like, oh, maybe that was an atmospheric beast, like dragons, right? Like maybe those were atmospheric beasts. Or
Okay, that
maybe UFOs in general were just atmospheric beasts. Like the whole thing is that there are these creatures that live in our atmosphere that are hydrogen based instead of like carbon based, like we are, right?
right. And
And they survive just solely based on the fact that they're being pushed around in our different weather systems and things like that. Like, so they're migratory, I guess.
and one thing that we can speak on is I think all the way back in December at this point we had Nick Hayes on, and he's now become a friend of the show. You know, he interacts with us quite a bit and keeps tabs on us. And that show was pretty much, I don't know if he would categorize what he was capturing with his photographs as these astral beasts, but I think you kind of made the connection, and that's
I
one
did.
that's sat with me pretty much the entire time since we had done that episode. And that this is a guy who has seemingly hundreds, if not more so, like maybe in the thousands of photographs of these things, and he has his technique that he learned and has enhanced and taken to like a whole nother level. But the stuff that he's photographing, I think, falls completely under that category of these astral beasts, and the evidence is right there, and just strikingly so. And we are also now being joined by Rai from Codega's
Codex of Curiosities.
Mouthful. It is a mouthful.
What up,
I-
Ronnie?
I love the. I gotta say, Drew, I love the new emblem there.
Yeah,
Yes.
I put it up there because I knew it was going to bother JC, because he's constantly telling me that my love for Kiss is like some elementary school.
Knights in
I
Satan's
don't-
service.
I don't think I've used those words. We're
I
getting
can
a little
infer.
dramatic.
I can infer, and I'll be as dramatic as I want to be. It's
You
the-
listen, I was super into Kiss in high school, and then I don't know what happened, but I just like started
see what he
hating
did
them.
there. See what he did there. That dig in high school. The way he even said it.
See,
Well, that
I
was like-
was into what was that? What was the Gene Simmons reality show? What was that one called again?
Family Jewels.
Yeah, I was into that for a bit, and then I just was like, oh my god, it just became like so blatantly scripted. It was terrible, and I'm like, okay, I can't watch this anymore. It's just too scripted. Like I know they do have some sort of scripts that they do try to follow just to have some sanity, but it was just too much. I'm like, I'm done.
I like garbage reality TV. It's my comfort food when paranormal and wrestling isn't on. So I actually was just watching like season 6 of The Surreal Life the other day, just for funsies. I just love garbage reality TV, even if it's 20 years old. And
I don't get me wrong. I do like some reality, and I just need to fix my. I realize that my
Life.
my light is a little off. Wee no. Oh, here we go.
Jeez.
that was
Spotlight
you
your
did.
face.
Flash.
Yeah, it's my camera. Actually, it's my camera that I'm adjusting. It's not even the light that I have. It's just my camera. So I have to do it every time I sign into StreamYard. I have to adjust my camera, and then as my like when the sun is setting, when I'm doing the. Sorry, JC, you made me laugh there. Just like a Christmas tree. Yeah, as the sun sets, I have to actually slowly adjust my camera manually, because if I leave it on the auto, it kind of does exactly what JC's is doing. It kind of like starts to like do like this funky kind of thing.
That's distracting.
I was using a remote to do that.
That's awesome. It's
I
awesome.
know. I have two LED towers on both sides of the screen.
Oh yeah, well watch this.
Whoa. Oh, we're doing blue.
I'm using a remote. I'm doing a remote. Well, I have two. So yeah, I have two LED mini towers on either side, and then I have a ring light
Uh-oh.
above.
I can't get it to go back.
Oh.
Go back.
Go back, W. Yeah, so I kind of if I turn the light down a little bit lower, then you can actually see more of the LED color that I'm using. But I like to go with purple because purple's cool.
I like green.
All right,
purple and green are show colors. There you go.
there
Yeah,
we go.
look at that.
There we go.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. The sky beasts.
Yes,
Atmospheric beasts.
yes.
Right. So we were discussing about, one of the earliest modern reports of those was from 1891 in Indiana, that people had reported a dragon-like creature up in the atmosphere with
Oh, so
propelling
this goes to
fins.
dragons too. Okay, this is interesting.
Well, it kind of, because now it was poor dragon like
Okay.
in that it was see through, that they could see through it, and that they'd also experienced intense feelings of dread while seeing it. And this was from multiple eyewitnesses in 1891 in Indiana, like randomly, right? Like in Indiana.
And you said that
And
there was like a sound that emanated from it.
Yeah, there was a that they had called a plaintive wheezing sound that could be heard from the sky. So
was that
I don't know.
like Andrew trying to wake up from his sleep paralysis?
Kind
sound?
of? Yeah, there was like sky. That's the sky goat,
The sky goat, exactly.
right? That's a different
But-
creature. We haven't touched on that yet.
I think that this wheezing is really interesting though, because it's like this very audible thing that cascades, and all of the witnesses heard it. So
Mhm.
but the way that it's described as a wheezing almost to me sounds like that could have been perhaps, and I hate to be Mr. Rational Thinker here, but could that not be the sound of perhaps like a hot air balloon or something going wrong with one?
I mean, we're talking 1891, right?
Okay,
So
but not
hot air.
But okay, along that premise, what about when you squeeze a balloon like when you're letting the air out of the balloon and you kind of hold it tightly, it makes like a
Right.
really wheezing type sound. Could that not be the same kind of concept? But I'm not talking hot air balloon. I'm talking the creature
How
is
they
releasing
move.
gas.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what we had mentioned is that for these beasts to survive in the atmosphere, they would have to be hydrogen based and not carbon based, right?
Yeah.
So definitely, if they were moving, they would be using what I would imagine would be some form of intake, outtake, kind of like a fish in water, right? But like in the atmosphere, they wouldn't just be swimming or moving through the atmosphere like we would here on Earth. Like we have gravity and we have propulsion and things like that. That wouldn't apply to these beasts in the atmosphere. So what the eyewitnesses claim, this was 18 feet long. So going back to the possibility that could have been a hot air balloon. I mean, even in 1891, people would have known what a hot air balloon looked like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like hot air balloons have been around for a while.
Yes, that they have.
Yeah, and the main thing is they said that it was dragon-like, but that it had lacked a definite shape. So the shape was changing as it was moving, and they said although it resembled a dragon-like creature, that they better described it as a great white shroud with propelling fins, a single flaming eye, and a wheezing plaintive sound, which added to its eerie presence, which that's the official report. And by official report, I mean that's what the newspaper from this town, Indiana, reported on.
What is it? What do they mean by shroud?
So for me, a shroud sounds like a cloud kind of like thing. Like, it was like a mist,
Okay.
sort of.
So does this now? I've always thought that this could be a possibility that the UFO that I saw in Chihuahua was a white cloud that changed shape and kind of like undulated and just kind of morphed around. And I've always thought, maybe is this some sort of biological entity or biological thing?
And that is the thing, the biological UFO. I think right before you got on, we were talking about Nick Hayes. We had Nick Hayes on back in either December or the beginning of January, and he was talking about unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs, that he was experiencing like in his backyard, or things that he was just not very far away, like not things that he was seeing way up away blinking lights, but things that he was picking up on. What kind of cameras was he picking those up on, Drew? Do you remember?
I think the technique is an ultraviolet.
UV he was using UV to pick them up.
Wow.
But they were close. They weren't like, miles and miles up in the sky. These were things that were like in his backyard.
He could go onto the rooftop and spend an evening and end up capturing one of these things, and it's just real slight. Ever, he's like basically you blink and you miss it kind of thing, and he's been collecting these photographs. So I know like JC's been wanting to talk about this forever, and I think what's cool is that we have that episode to fall back on because he has so many photographs and so much evidence, and I think it kind of falls in line with this and it confirms it. And I think what we're seeing in his photographs are these, I don't know if we're going to call them interdimensional or just whatever plane that these astral beings exist on. I think that he has all the evidence in the world for it, and it's kind of being slept on because the way he's presenting it is more so as like just an unidentified thing. And essentially, I think he's got the proof.
Yeah, I think one of the things is like we have creatures that live in our oceans. We know that there is biological life under the Earth's mantle because we have those like lava worms and stuff that can live in that intense heat, right? Then there's us, there's the life here on the surface. And why? So I guess the theory is that there theoretically could be life living in the clouds in the atmosphere, right? Like there's for sure we have animals that are bound to the surface that can fly, though, that navigate on the wind, and the what's that called? What are the airflows called up there?
Air currents.
The currents. Yeah, currents. That's
Sorry,
it.
I'm like saying it, and then I'm like, oh crap, my mic is muted because of the dogs.
Yeah,
air currents.
So why can't there be hydrogen-based life forms in the atmosphere that exist? Now, there are stories that go as far as saying there are sky whales, whales that are living up in the clouds and things like that. But we can just go even closer to home. Like, how do we know that these UAPs, these UFOs, aren't these hydrogen-based creatures? Are they coming from space, or are they coming from our own atmosphere?
Well, now that you bring that up, I can relate my UFO experience as well, which was a completely different experience than Rye had. But I also can't say that I saw any type of actual craft. It was pure light, just orbs. And so those things, the way that they moved and the way that they eventually, disappeared, I think that we could also, generally speaking, maybe classify it as this type of possibility as well, just because there wasn't anything solid in front of me. So I think a lot of the UFO experiences can eventually maybe be attributed to something like this. And specifically, a couple of months ago, we had that jellyfish UAP that was filmed in the Middle East. And when we're talking about this kind of stuff, I think I would be remiss not to maybe correlate the creatures that we have in our deep oceans that would look very similar to the creatures that are being described right here. And go ahead.
Yeah.
Right. Your fan club's here.
I know. Thanks, guys.
Hey, since we're on the topic of sky jellyfish, I want to bring up something that occurred in 1994
in Oakland. I know. I was going to bring that up.
No. Oakville.
Oh, Oakville. Sorry. The blobs that fell from the sky.
You got it, man.
Which ties in exactly with these sky beasts. If there is some sort of beast up there, and perhaps one gets blown up or it dies and it just kind of falls apart, would that not be it? And like there's things in the air that to support these creatures, like they've discovered perpetually airborne microorganisms, which spend their whole lives floating in the air. And they've also have discovered microscopic algae that live permanently in the clouds. So you have a food source. That is the most important thing, is to have, what are they eating? A food source. And we have that. So what does that tell us? Well, where there's food, there's predators of sorts. Like there are other creatures that are going to eat on them.
And there
So
would
you've
be
two
plenty
building-
of moisture.
Yeah.
I was going to say there would be plenty of moisture in the sky, so that there's
Mhm.
a water source consistently up in the atmosphere. So both of the things that you need to necessitate life are just there.
Exactly. And I think who you're talking about is possibly cryptozoology author Ivan T. Sanderson, maybe, who was who had posted that. Sorry. I think that's PJ. P. Jane is who she could be talking about.
Yeah. So we already have the two building blocks of life in the atmosphere, right? Like here on Earth, we're carbonic creatures. So let's go atmosphere, hydrogen, food source, right? So you already have the two most important building blocks of life, right? But for those that don't know the blob story, I just want to cover it really quick.
Yeah, sorry. I only touched on it, but please go.
No, so there was the town of Oakville, Washington, that had a population of 723 people. There was a rainstorm that happened, and during this rainstorm, these translucent gelatinous blobs fell from the sky and landed in this town in torrents. Like there weren't just sporadic, but like there were just clumps of gelatinous blobs everywhere. People on people's houses, on the ground, wherever you went. It was reported by the police officer on patrol that started about 3 a.m, and the substance was such a bizarre consistency. It was like goo, that if you tried to pull it off of something, it would stick and snap back on there. So there was like this whole thing around, like, scientists came in and they took the goo and it was unidentifiable, whatever it was. And a lot of the witnesses that were like outside when this happened ended up becoming sick. Like, they ended up
which is really weird.
Right? Like, why would you? And I think it was written off that like something about there was a storm that picked up some birds and it killed birds, and that was like their gelatinous bodies or something like that. Like just off the wall kind of stuff. Or it was fish, not birds. Sorry, the storm
jellyfish. I think it was possibly even they were trying to say jellyfish, but some of these explanations I think are even more far-fetched than actually what it possibly could be.
Right? Like that the fish or jellyfish were picked up and just thrown in massive amounts on this town. And that's not the only place or account of this happening. There have been other places around the world. I think there was one in Chile. I'll have to look it up. I want to say like the early to mid 2000s that there was like this gelatinous stuff falling from the sky, and it's been reported in Europe. It's been reported in other places. And then you kind of think, and I don't even know if I want to go here, but I want to go back to, and I'm going to Hail Mary full of grace here. I want to go back to biblical times in the Old Testament when the Jews were out in the desert.
Okay.
And God had given them manna to subsist themselves, right? Like that's the only thing they could survive on. And where did that come from? It came down from the sky, right? And what was manna? It was a honey jelly like substance.
Interesting.
That's an interesting correlation.
Now, that's just a wild correlation I made. I've never seen anybody else make that, but it was just something that I thought of that,
you hold on to that one though.
Yeah, P gene here. Star jelly. That's it. Yeah.
What I would then ask, based on that correlation, you brought it up, is how do we correlate that to Oakville or wherever it was where this occurred? What would be the purpose for that manna to rain down on that day? You know what I mean?
Maybe this creature was extremely sick and it died, and as it dies, like maybe they disintegrate, but maybe it was in much lower atmosphere, and as it was falling, it just crumbled into pieces, and maybe
right.
That's why people became sick from it, because this creature was sick. I don't know. spitballing here, throwing something out.
Yeah, so the story of star jellies actually goes all the way back to the 17th century to the 1600. It was written in poems about star jelly on the ground, slime molds. There's all kinds of things, variety of explanations. Something from amphibians, algae, slime molds. But this was an actual report by multiple people and by reputable people, right? Like the chief police had reported that this was not just something that appeared overnight, that it was raining down from the sky.
You know if there's any photographs?
I think there are.
Yeah,
I think there are. Yeah,
I can pull them up if you want. If
please.
you guys want to keep talking, I will get some.
So I think that photographic evidence, it goes a long way, especially when this is in a paper and you have somebody like the chief of police who, as we all know, anybody who knows these types of people, when they're away from the public, they're more than happy to share these stories at a bar or something over a beer. But, when it comes to publicly talking about any of this stuff, especially strange and unusual, it might be harder to talk about something like this than a straight up UFO encounter. And people are terrified of public opinion, especially if you're a public figure. So,
I agree.
That level of public servant just coming out and talking about it so audaciously, I think really lends some credence to what's going on.
Well, UFO is like, oh, I saw a light in the sky, right? And it moved and I saw things. Now, this is totally different because now you're saying that you saw blobs of jelly raining down in your town. that you have been tasked with protecting your town, right? So this is a completely different thing.
But the thing is, though, but if everyone is talking about it, though, then I think it's more common. It's a multi-person experience, so that's what I'm thinking on that one.
Steven Seagal said, "My first time here. Who are you guys? We're a bunch of weirdos, but welcome, Steven. We like your movies. Thanks for showing up."
I already made that joke, but thank you for.
Oh yeah, you did. Sorry, no, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. You're right.
That's how identical we are. We have that same sense of humor right out of the gate.
That's awesome, and I'm still working on some pictures. I'll be ready.
Yeah, no worries.
In a minute or two. Not even.
Yeah, we're gonna sit here in silence until you have.
Yeah, everybody just say. Yeah.
Well, but, I don't want to jump to like a different topic too quick, but like, have you guys heard of the rods?
Yeah, and here's the thing with rods.
Yeah, they disappeared. Yeah, that like topic. Rods were huge, and then all of a sudden you don't hear anything from it.
Dude, everybody just attributed rods to insects.
Yes, when I was in high school,
that's it.
When I was in high school and I was obsessed with like this stuff, and I was doing all the research that I possibly could. Rods were huge. There were all kinds of videos, and it seemed like. Right, sorry, man. Yeah, I got what you're saying. I should have reworded that. I should have worded that in a better way, man. The rods were huge.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm leaving. I'll see you guys later.
I'll see myself out. Yeah.
No, but anyways, like during that time period, like there were tons of videos. I remember on MySpace. Remember MySpace? There were tons of videos of people posting like these rods on and some of them were like you said, like insect like, where you could attribute to, okay, maybe it was an insect flying very quickly across the screen, but some people had videos of these rods that had like these wave I don't know if you want to call them fins, but like these physical attributes to them that like they would stop, they would move, they would stop, they would move.
Yes, it was the stopping and starting kind of thing, which was crazy.
And again, we're going back to like the UFOs, UAP stuff. Like, is this are these worldly creatures, because a lot of these were filmed, I'm trying to think, a lot of these were filmed in like cave areas, like areas where there were caves or water sources. I remember a lot of them were filmed there.
100%. You know, looking up from like they're down in a cave and they're looking up, like maybe in a cenote, like here in Mexico, where you
Yes.
the open ones where you can look up, and I that's exactly what I recall too.
I mean, can we tie this in with like fairies? Like how? I mean, I think there's a lot of different. I mean, obviously, this is all unknown stuff, right? Like we can't we
It's
can't say
nothing but
either way,
speculation. So
right?
as long if we can make a correlation, I think that it would be we wouldn't be doing our jobs not to.
Exactly.
It's, PG says, but they aren't. Rods are different, aren't they? What's that? What is that in? Oh, so like star jelly. Yes, the rods are different than star jelly for sure.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
that's it right there.
So here's some, and this is one of the original pictures. You can tell because it's terrible,
Blurry,
terrible quality.
right.
Yeah, and here, lovely. It almost looks like hail in a way, but it's not. You know, like this is some sort of.
It's a jelly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very gelatinous and like stellulitic.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the explanations was that it was some kind of amphibians like eggs. I mean, I'm going to just tell you guys right now, I've been alive for 34 years and I've lived in the backwaters of nowhere, and I have never seen jelly like this on the ground. I mean, Drew, Rye, have you guys ever seen anything like this just chilling out on the ground?
Never. No, of course not.
No.
And of course, those are some of the, they're again, the explanations out, are crazier than what could be even the truth. So,
Massachusetts has the mine in the gutter here.
yeah, Massachusetts. Yeah, we won't go there. Yeah. Yeah, and like interdimensional. So PJ is saying, "See, I never considered interdimensional for the rods. Why? Like, me neither. You know, interdimensionals never. Yeah, that's fine. Interdimensionals never really come up for me in creatures until like the last 4 years, maybe we'll say, when it's kind of like, these things are coming in through portals, doorways. They have a way just to cut through into our reality, or they're all here and we just can't see them, and they allow us to see them at certain times. You know, maybe they're in a different light spectrum.
So
yes, PG. Oh, I'm sorry, Drew. Go ahead.
I don't know if we were going to bring up the same thing or not, but Mouse had said frog eggs with a question mark, and that actually prompted me to Google and take a look at it. And while that is a rational thought process, I'm actually not seeing anything in the way of a frog egg that looks even remotely similar.
No,
that
they don't, and they would. It rains, and they wouldn't be just randomly like in the fields and stuff. They lay those in like bogs and like creek beds and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Except when they're flying in the air and they just drop a load.
Yeah, it could be interdimensional.
Interdimensional
flying
frogs.
frogs.
Okay,
Oh
we
man!
go.
Well,
we
guys, I don't think we're equipped to talk about that tonight.
That's okay. That's okay.
But
PG, so they were able to collect it. They were able to collect it, and they discovered certain bacterias within it. Do you want to expand on that one, or do you have that?
I don't. I just off of memory that so they collected it, and like you said, they discovered a different bacterium and stuff, but also that it disintegrated very quickly.
I'm trying to see if I can silence. Yeah, I was trying to see because I did have something opened earlier where they were talking about this, but bacterial growth, missing samples. So they were fairly common bacteria, nothing too weird, but the blobs themselves, that's a whole other story. The opinion of the epidemiologist who studied the samples was that it was man-made, which is pretty a bold conclusion that would require more testing to be done to the sample. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very bold conclusion, especially because you have multiple witness reports. And we're not even just talking in Oakville, right? Like, this has been reported in other locations. But if we're just focusing on Oakville, you have the chief of police who was on duty at 3 a.m.
Yes.
Who said that this stuff was raining from the sky. What does the chief of police of Oakville, Washington
Yeah.
some small backwoods town in the state of Washington have to gain by making up that some jelly fell from the sky. Like, well, you got to consider motives here. And then people were sick. Like, verifiably,
Yeah.
people that interacted or were out during this time were sick. The chief
And
of
that-
police
and that-
were sick.
And that has to do with the bacteria. So the DOH, Department of Health, found 2 types of bacteria in the sample. Pseudomonas fluorescens, which is common bacteria that can be harmful to humans, but usually only those with compromised immune systems. And the other was Enterobacter colace. It also found all over, but it's known to contribute to infections of the lungs,
Yes.
blood, and urinary
Yes.
tract.
Yes, and that's what they experienced. They experienced flu-like symptoms, coughing, things like that. Steven Seagal said he lives in Steven lives in the northern part of Wisconsin, deep in the woods, and they've seen what they called star jelly or some kind of slime fungus. Asking if it's dangerous, I don't know.
It's all speculation at this point, but I'm curious here. I was trying to figure out what type of geographical coincidence might occur between this incident and where our guest on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, James Shubsky, lives, because he's out in that area and he has this store. I believe it's called Margie's Corner.
Yes.
And it's in Klickitat County. And he was going. He spent a large portion of the podcast getting deep into detail about that area's high strangeness and how they think that it's like attributed to even like ancient volcanic activity and a lot of the UAPs and like Thunderbird, Sky Beast kind of scenario were seen out around Mount St. Helen and everything. So I'm curious, being that this stuff rained down in Washington, if geographically it's near anything volcanic.
That's a good point.
It's interesting.
So we'll have to do some type of light research on that. But
yeah, I can't speak to that. Pete, go ahead, Drew. Sorry,
I can't imagine something like gelatin like that coming as a direct result from a volcano, but it does appear that a lot of paranormal strangeness occurs near volcanic areas.
Well, let's think about this, Drew. Now that you brought up the volcanoes, a lot of different chemical reactions are happening at the volcanic level, but also at the atmospheric level, right? Because you have these plumes going up into the sky, interacting with the hydrogen, the water, the oxygen molecule, stuff like that. How do we know that's not creating life in the atmosphere?
Or killing life in the atmosphere.
That's a good point. Also, killing life in the atmosphere. So maybe it is. I mean, Oakville, Washington is right in range of Mount St. Helen. I mean, that would make sense to me. It's a better explanation than, it was frogs. Right? Or it was that's the frogs, guys. It was the frogs out there. Even though we have multiple eyewitness reports that it was raining from the sky, separate eyewitness reports that had never spoken to each other too. It wasn't like a group of people that just witnessed it. And a chief of police who has since passed, so nothing to gain from it, didn't get rich off of it.
What year did this occur again, JC?
1994.
So when did Mount St. Helen erupt?
That was in the 80s.
Yeah, it was
So
like 83 or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking like 84, but it's around 84. There. But there is volcanoes in the area. Other weather extreme events. Let's see here in Oakville. So Mount St. Helens was. When did this happen? Okay, so distance in miles. So volcanoes nearby. Mount St. Helens is 66 miles away. Rainier is 70 miles. West Crater is 87. Indian Heaven is 92, and Adams is 94 miles away. These are
that's all super close, actually.
Yeah.
The blood rain. Yeah, I was gonna touch on that after Rye was done.
Yeah, let's get into that when he makes his point. I'm not familiar with it.
the blood
Yeah,
rain?
go ahead. Go ahead. That's just it. I was just giving you the sorry, just the volcanoes and last eruptions. You know, like there's 1800 to 1899. So a lot of them are dormant, pretty much dormant volcanoes. But
So we can rule out volcanoes really for the most part there.
Well,
Mhm.
natural volcano eruption, or that doesn't rule out that there would be some celestial breeding ground or activity from the paranormal that's existing, like
Sure.
co-habitually with the volcano.
Right. I wasn't ruling that anything paranormal. I was just ruling out that, there's no evidence that any kind of weird volcanic event could have caused this because it's outside of that timing. But I guess we're going to touch on blood rain here, which blood rain goes the whole way back to Homer's Iliad. If you're familiar with that story, that Zeus caused a blood rain 2 times. So there have been occasions throughout history where it rained red, it rained blood for all intents and purposes. And in many of the cases, they were able to study it and it came back as like microorganisms like algae, like we had talked about algae being able to survive in the atmosphere and stuff like that. But at the same time, there are other events where there was really no explanation. I think on a few occasions that there had been samples taken, specifically if anyone's familiar with the Kentucky meat shower. I'll say that again, the Kentucky meat shower that happened.
Sounds like a good barbecue.
A good barbecue or a good porno.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel.
Right. It happened in 1876. And it occurred in Olympia Springs, Kentucky, where it basically rained blood and corpuscles of. Oops, I destroyed my setup.
I saw.
But anyways, it's all good. It rained, fluids that, when collected, had blood cells in them. And this is back in 1876. So, we're just on the verge of being able to identify blood cells, white blood cells, things like that. So what ended up happening, it was attributed to there being a very bad storm, and birds, specifically buzzards, had thrown up what they had consumed. And that was what their barf was what was said to have fallen in Olympia Springs, Kentucky. That was the story. So I'm gonna fix myself here real quick.
That's a terrible story. I don't know about you, Andrew, but yeah, it was birds throwing up and puking all over this one specific town because why? No. So what? Because one bird pukes, they all puked. Maybe they all had a bad dead cow. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that.
Okay, so birds regurgitate their food to feed babies, right? So they'll chew up food and then spit it into their babies' mouths, right?
Yeah.
So a bird doesn't have the capacity to vomit enough that it would create that much chaos. And we've all had bird poop on our windshields and stuff. It's pretty small splats. These are not, and are these thunderbirds that are throwing up on people? That to me, I think, is a bygone time of simpletons clinging for some type of explanation for something that they just don't have.
Yeah, because it's all about, we need to believe that there's nothing else crazy out there. We have to take the mindset of everything that we see is all that is real, and anything that we don't see is not real. So we're gonna, it has to be this, or what? Or it's weather balloons with people carrying meat, chuck steaks up into the weather balloons and dropping them down on people. Like,
just for fun.
Yeah, just for funsies. Yeah, let's do that.
Massachusetts Storing brought up about the amount of blood in that plane blades. There were no planes yet, unfortunately. I think the comment was made before I said the year 1876.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Um,
that predates a lot of aeronautics, and even it predates a lot of modern ufology too.
Hmm.
So this is something that's completely out of left field for everyone experiencing this. So I mean, we're laughing at it, but it's almost like what else do you rationalize other than, well, I guess the birds are throwing up on us.
man, they didn't have time to build a nest. They were just feeding their babies.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, that's
I want to point out though, 1876. Okay, so we're not even like at the Industrial Revolution yet. Most of this country doesn't even have electricity. Imagine living in Olympia Springs, Kentucky, and all of a sudden it just starts raining red blood and like chunks of meat on you. Like that's end of days, right?
that's
Like
that's like
you're
plague.
freaking the hell out. You know what's going on? So actually, Scientific American had reported on this that many claim that the chunks of corpuscle or like mangled whatever that was falling from the sky were actually beef. And it was inconclusive. Any tests done on it, obviously being 1876, not the best testing, but they were inconclusive on what the actual strands of protein, the meat that fell. It was inconclusive, but they were able to identify that it was a protein of some sort.
But here's the thing, what you're saying, sorry, going back to what you're saying, people are thinking of as the end times, end of the world. Well, I'm telling you right now, if it started raining like chunks of meat, I'm going to be thinking the same thing right now. I'm like, that's it.
Well, you
Find
could
the bunker.
fire the grill up, right?
Right.
Fair enough. It's
That's-
almost like it reminds me of, what is that? Sunny with a chance of
Chance
Cloudy-
of meatballs.
cloudy
Cloudy
with
with
a
a
chance of
chance of
meatballs. Yeah.
meatballs. Yeah. Maybe that's where that story came from. It's like, okay, we're gonna write this kid story just to make everybody a little more, used to it, to get you used to this before it actually starts happening.
Right. So, sorry, Drew. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I actually lost my train of thought. I had a point. If I remember it, we'll come back to it. But go
So,
ahead.
I wanted to expand a little bit. And I know we're going outside of the realm of atmospheric beasts here, but let's go a little bit further. Okay. Let's go to like space creatures, right? So let's just assume for a second that we have beasts that can survive in our atmosphere. Do we also have creatures that can survive in outer space? We know other planets have supported some sort of life form, whether that be like bacterium or just a single cell kind of life form, like on Mars or like Venus. Like, so we have these creatures that live in the most extreme places on Earth. I mentioned those like volcanic worms that live under the ocean. They're just getting blasted with like heat and volcanic activity. Why can't those exist on other planets? And in that case, why can't things exist in space? So space is a vacuum, right? So how would something like that survive in space? Because technically there's no like life building blocks just in space itself. But, and I mentioned this, and I think Rye might remember this. I don't remember when I mentioned this. It was a couple of weeks ago on one of the Tuesday town hall sessions. I said about the radio, the Van Allen belt.
The Van Allen radiation.
Well, there's a radiation wall that like we can't see it past, like outside of our our universe and everything. What's beyond that? And why is it there?
How do we get through it?
Well,
have we gotten through it?
I don't think we've gotten through it. We don't even know what's in our own oceans, let alone what's in outer space.
Yeah.
But why can't there be space creatures that are adapted? Microbiomes and things like that are very and highly adaptive to extremes, and we know that because we have extremes here on Earth. So why can't there be, I don't know, like a space fish swimming around out there somewhere?
It's like Jurassic Park says, life finds a way. And I think that when you look at it in that very basic scientific explanation that life finds a way, I think that it's not out of the realm of possibility that something like that can exist. And that I think it's very egotistical and very small thinking and simple minded that a human being thinks that life accidentally happened and it can't accidentally happen somewhere else, and that Earth is the only place where life exists. And we can start bashing Neil deGrasse Tyson any second now because he's such a doucher for that same thought process and mentality. Yep. But we see it, we have record of it, we are proof of it. Life exists in some form. What we are, we don't know, but we're here and we see other life forms, and there's absolutely no reason that it couldn't occur somewhere else. And like you're saying, those extremes are very adaptable to these simpler life forms. You don't have to be an upright walking hominid to exist and experience life. So I think we have exactly what you're questioning, JC. I think it's out there for sure.
I mean, can we capture like some, I'm not a space expert here, but space is a vacuum. So I can't just say, can we just get some space air and then analyze it, right? Like we can't just take a jar and grab some space air, but there has to be something, because if there was a lack of nothing, we wouldn't be able to go there, right? Mm-hmm. Like it can't just be nothing. But there's something
are we going there anyhow?
Well, let's for a second assume that that's all true and we've been into space and like we've broken through the mantle and everything, just for this purpose.
You mean the firmament?
So
let's call it, yes.
So space is a vacuum. They say there's nothing there. There's no sound. You can't breathe. You can't hear anything. But there's got to be something there, right? Because if not, everything would be torn apart. There can't be nothing. So take a jar and grab whatever's there. Let's see if there's some life there. I don't know. Neil Armstrong, what are you doing?
We can also lean into this idea of the multiverse and the interdimensional beings, because something that we perceive as the vacuum of space, when you cross that veil, could be something entirely different.
But it can't be a vacuum though. Like that doesn't make sense to me.
Right, I agree. But when you're looking beyond that and we're trying to cross that veil, right? So if this is Earth and this is the moon, and we'll use quotation marks, there's a period of space in between. So if we're going to cross interdimensions into some type of multiverse scenario, whatever is leaning up against us in that moment may not even have the same properties that we're being told exist in that area. So that vacuum that we are told is out there, or that we perceive is out there, could be the ocean to this other dimension that is then leaning against us. And then that becomes an access point where they cross over and they're in the atmosphere. And maybe that's why they all kind of appear to be oceanic creatures that are these celestial beings. Not to blow everybody's mind there, but I think I just solved the jellyfish problem.
Rye, I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you weren't into this much, Andrew, with to the sky beast and everything, but look at like this theory is mind blowing.
Yeah, I was just giving him some some crap. I wouldn't I wouldn't say I'm not into any of this, and I like to be challenged, and I kind of like to come in without a lot of knowledge ahead of time, so that way I was able to sit there and kind of formulate that. But I
Interesting.
I mean, it makes as much sense as anything else. I mean, I would put that right up there with birds throwing up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah, it's not that great of an explanation. Plausible, but I mean, like anything's plausible. So I liked your analogy of like outer space or the vacuum of space being the actual ocean. And I want to call out one thing, and we're way outside of atmospheric beasts right now.
Well, if you see, it says "and other nonsense," so we're in
And
the
other nonsense.
And other nonsense. Exactly.
So again, if we're to believe that space is a vacuum, okay, and let's go interstellar here. Let's go outside of our solar system. Let's go outside of our universe. There is no gravity holding universes together, right? Like they just exist in the vacuum of space. So then that begs the question is how is that possible? Because without gravity, there is no vacuum. Right? Like that's the whole point of the vacuum of space is that gravity creates that vacuum.
It's
Yeah.
it's difficult.
I think we kind of surmised a couple of weeks ago on our town hall that space is just bullshit, and
Yeah.
we don't know anything, and everything that they tell us is either on purpose or accidentally infactual.
Now, here's the thing from Steven Seagal. Says, I've heard from credible sources space is oil-like. Okay. Now, if we go back to the Bible, you know, the waters above. They talk about the waters above, the firmament. Okay. So imagine that this is the salt water. We're in the salt water, and those are possibly the fresh water, the pure waters. When you mix the two, when you mix salt water and fresh water, at the point that they meet, it is extremely oil-like to the point that you can't see through. Now, if we go into the space, you know, NASA, they're showing all these videos that they're in space. Could it not be water? Because if you watch, didn't one astronaut, his whole suit was filling up with water, and they're like, "Oh, some excuse." And then when you're watching, you see a lot of bubbles, like air bubbles, going by. Could this not be that this is actually water? And at this point where these two waters meet, this oil-like that Steven Seagal is talking about, could that not be the mixing of the two waters? Just a thought. And the reason why I know that is because I'm a scuba diver, and there's these cenotes here in Mexico. Some of them are half freshwater, half saltwater. And when you go down, when you go through those different I don't want to say thermoclines, but the different layers, when you hit the two that they mix, you can't see anything. It is like oil all over. It looks like it's oil all over your mask. But as soon as you go down into the salt water, it's clear. Or you go back up. Like if you go above or below that, then it's clear. It's interesting.
Yeah, I did not know that. That is a interesting take for space as well. You know, it's not something that I had considered at all prior to this conversation. So I'm going to look into that a little more, see if I can find anything. Maybe do a deep dive on Reddit or something when we wrap up.
Yeah. So it is extremely interesting that this could be something. I don't know. I've never really thought of this until Steven Seagal just mentioned that it's oil-like, and I was like, well, here's the theory. Again, that's all we talk. We just talk hypothesis and theories.
Yeah, we don't use citations here.
Yeah, I absolutely don't apologize for having cited all of my sources for my sleep paralysis, because so many people have just casually waved it off as, you just need to sleep better, or you're just exhausted, or you're tired, or it's traumatic, or
it's just a dream. It's just a dream. It's not real. Second
shift. Like, can a person literally go 30 years of their life tired? Like, I don't think it's possible that if that's the case, then, you know, at some point I would have got some sleep. You know, I haven't been working second shift. I wasn't working second shift when I was 5 years old. It just, I won't get into it. That's why I cite my sources for the sleep paralysis.
No, and I think it's good that you do, and I applaud that. But that's more than some things I do. So good on you, Andrew. Maybe
So
because you're not sleeping so much, you have that extra time.
Right. It's easy to do that research when you are constantly have at least one eye open.
Yeah, gripping your.
So I wanted to
pillow tight.
bring up some writings by Metallica referencing.
Yeah,
I wanted to bring up the writing by Ivan T. Sanderson, who was a noted Bigfoot author, who speculated that Bigfoot was an atmospheric beast.
What? Okay.
And when did he speculate this? Do you have?
I don't have a year here. Hold on, let me. T. Anderson. I mean, he died in 73, so sometime between 1911 and 73.
Okay.
He had made. So let's hold on, because he didn't call it Bigfoot. It was a Bigfoot-like creature, so some kind of hominid ape-like creature. That the reason that they were able to be sighted and disappeared so quickly is because they didn't live on Earth. They weren't multi-dimensional, but they lived in the atmosphere and occasionally would come down for feeding or mating, he says, or whatever other reasons that they would have to come down to Earth. Apparently they couldn't just do it up in the sky. They had to come down here. Yeah, right.
It's how we end up with star jelly.
Ruined. Man, I'm sorry, Oakville, Washington, what you would experience. But an interesting theory, because there are a lot of theories about Bigfoot being interdimensional or being from other planets. But what if he's just from the sky?
So I'm usually pretty open to things, but that one for me is a little bit of a stretch. I personally will say it's a stretch for me.
I agree with that. But I think that's interesting because it is possibly the first public author to maybe create something more of like a high strangeness with Bigfoot rather than
and that was pre-Bigfoot even being a thing, right? Because he died in 73.
Well, Gimlin was 67, so depending on what
like Bigfoot itself as a name is pretty much after the Patterson Gimlin film, but before, and I had an argument with a guy about this on Reddit. Of course I did, but I'm like, it doesn't mean Bigfoot didn't exist from that point on. It always did. We go back into the native folklore; they talk about it all the time.
That's true. Yeah, it goes back further than that. He didn't call it Bigfoot; he just called it it was an ape-like hominid.
So potentially this theory predates Patterson Gimlin too. So
yeah, I call Patterson Gimli.
Yes, I'm gonna look into that. I'll have to have you send me that. I'm interested.
Yeah, Ivan T. Anderson, because he speculated that these are actually creatures from the sky. They're sky apes, basically, is what he was saying.
Interesting. It's an interesting thought, but I would need to see more. I need to see why he's come to that conclusion, actually. So I can't discredit it, without actually, because then I feel like I'm just like everybody else who's like, oh, you're talking bullshit. No, I guess I need to see the research and see why he's come to that conclusion. I think would be the better thing to say.
So he had two books called Invisible Residents. One dealt with things in the atmosphere, and the other one dealt with things under the water. So it was both written in 1970. So it was I'm assuming, the book that dealt with the ones in the atmosphere. But he has a ton of books. Actually, 61, he wrote a book. He wrote about the abominable snowman. He has some history books. He has a book about like whales from 1956. Where did the whales come from?
They were one of the first creatures created in Genesis.
Yeah, 1937, animal treasures. So he has quite a few. God, he's got like 30 books here he wrote during his lifetime. So
dude's just trying to figure out how the universe works. I have
Yeah.
I think there's a romance to those like mid-century pseudoscience books. I
Oh, for
always
sure.
liked finding them in the library and stuff when I was young, even before
It
I
just
could really appreciate or read them properly.
just reading about like humans or people just disregarding everything else and trying to figure out how things came into existence
Yeah,
is fun, right?
it is. It really was. For me, it was actually reading books on giants and dragons. That was my thing.
I was okay. I'll admit to this. I don't know if you had this in Canada, but I probably 20 years ago at this point, there was Discovery's like first attempt at what they would eventually do with Shark Week, where they basically turned it all into fake mockumentary. They did a fake mockumentary about dragons, and the entire premise of this program was that they found a dragon body and that it was perfectly preserved, and it was like this big, huge scientific thing. And you watch 2 hours of this documentary, and then at the very end, there's a disclaimer that just made the whole damn thing up. But there was no indication in the advertisements leading into it that it was anything but the monumental scientific discovery. So I watched that, and I watched it with bated breath and as like a middle schooler, and I couldn't believe, like, holy shit, man, dragons are actually real. And then they did that at the end. So ever since then, I I didn't fall off of dragons. I've obviously played Dungeons and Dragons, and never stopped reading fantasy and Tolkien and everything. But whenever somebody has any correlation to real life, I always remember that troll job that Discovery did, and it just kind of tans my hide a little bit, because as a youngster, we fell for it. It was a family thing. We sat there, like my aunt, my uncle, my cousins were just sitting there watching what we thought was like this great discovery, and yeah, they got us. They got us really good with that one.
Exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. I have not seen that. I know what you're talking about, but I've never seen it, and I would like to actually just watch it just to see how it goes. That sounds cool.
Yeah, watching it now, 20 years later or whatever, 25, however many years it has been, just to kind of see it from that standpoint of it's that easy. Like, it's
Mhm.
that easy to pull the wool over somebody. If they didn't put a disclaimer at the end of that, there would have been millions of people that thought dragons were real and that there was scientific evidence of it. And they did the same thing with Megalodon a couple of years back on Shark Week, but they were a little more transparent about it. But the amount of people after that Shark Week who thought that it was real and that the Megalodon had been discovered as still living was like mind-numbing. But that's a perfect example.
Look what they did with War of the Worlds just over a radio broadcast. People were scared shitless.
Right.
Yeah, that's like your initial Project Bluebeam. That's like low-key Project Bluebeam.
Yeah, people literally killed themselves because they thought that aliens were mankind is gullible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I highlighted it, because it is that easy. So when somebody kind of looks at us from afar and questions why we're questioning things, like, from now on, I'm going to talk about this Dragon special, because that was in our lifetime. That was very much a thing that everyone I knew thought was real, and up until like the final minute of that program. Yeah. So
Thanks, guys. Yeah, that's really interesting, though. Yeah, because that's like modern day War of the Worlds is pretty much what they're doing. It's like, look how gullible everyone is, and they all believe it. And then, it's like those mockumentaries. They make mockumentaries all the time now, and some people actually believe them, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
People are very gullible. People are very gullible, and that's the problem, is because we become reliant on media. And we have relied we believe that media is there to give us the truth, and we don't have to do any work ourselves. We're just lazy, and you just tell me what to think. Okay, this is happening. Okay, I'll believe that. Oh, we're being invaded by aliens. Okay, I'm not gonna actually go look out the window myself. I'll just climb in a hole and cover myself up.
Yeah, but hey, I have an acquaintance that if it's not on TV, it's not true. He literally will say, "Oh, well, I've never saw that on TV, so it's not real."
No.
So unless the TV tells him that it's true, it's not true.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, that's how people have been programmed, though, since at least
It's
like the
true.
60s and 70s, right? Like,
Hmm.
right, the news is the guardian of democracy, and
Yeah.
they're the, what do you want to call them? The third, whatever,
I don't know.
if you,
It's like the new sports teams. It's kind of like I cheer for CNN. Oh, I like Fox. Oh, we're fighting each other because my team is better than your team, or it's crap.
Meanwhile,
both
while everybody else is fighting over that, the real problem's right behind them, under the
Mhm.
veil,
Mhm.
continuing all the nefarious activity because we have allowed ourselves to be distracted.
Yes,
That is-
amen. What do you think about? So I actually, who's that? So I actually think like the Tyson. What's his name?
Paul, Logan
Yeah.
Paul,
Jake
Logan
Paul.
or Jay. Oh, sorry, it's
Jake Paul.
Jake. Yeah, my bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a distraction because didn't you guys see someone come forward just recently and start talking about Bohemian Grove, and where's that news? Nowhere.
I was fully distracted because I'm such a Mike Tyson fan, so it worked on me. I actually, this is news to me because for the last week, all I've heard about is Jake Paul and Tyson.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a guy, Ryan. His name is Ryan something, and he is coming forward and bringing a lot of stuff to light and calling out a lot of people. So it's interesting. Another whistleblower, but it's kind of like, oh, let's hide it.
Hey, also speaking of whistleblowers, there was a whistleblower testifying against Boeing, and he didn't make it to this.
I saw that. Yeah.
Didn't make it to the second testimony because he's dead. Apparent suicide. He was clearly. I mean, I don't want to be suicided, so I might be careful with what I say, but I think you can surmise what actually happened to that whistleblower. And again, not a lot of people are talking about that either.
Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Yeah, it's happening more and more. But Andrew and JC, I got to get out of here. I got to get to bed here, and I got to take the dog out. So I really appreciate this.
I think we could probably wrap it up here, right, Drew?
We accomplished it. We did it. Thank you for watching. Those of you who have spent the time here with us. This was our first live in a long time. We're going to try to start doing these after our town halls on Tuesdays with our guests. And follow Rye.
And follow these guys.
If you aren't already. And,
exactly. But of course, if you're here watching this live, you probably are.
Yeah, I like to think that we've pulled some of you.
So.
And all right, good night, Ryan. Thanks for joining us.
Right.
Thanks so much, guys. I'll let you guys finish off. Thanks so much.
Take care, bro.
Yeah, so we accomplished what we set out to do. Let's not overstay our welcome. It is getting late here.
No.
It's almost midnight where I'm at.
We can always touch on it again in the future.
Anyone who's watching, we appreciate it. Check out all of our content. We're constantly adding new things. We have weekly episodes of our podcast. We have weekly episodes of Far Out Folklore. We have a documentary sitting on our channel that I'm very proud of that we shot in a very short period of time between 2 snowstorms in the Northeast. We're working on a lot of stuff. You have anything to add, JC?
Thanks everybody for coming in. Everyone's participated in chat. We love all you. Keep supporting us. We support you too.
Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out. I'm booking.
Oh, absolutely. If you have stories that you want to tell, reach out to us, man. Everybody. We'll get the stories out there.
We're happy to include everybody, even if you don't want to be featured directly on the show. We can
Yep.
we can speak for you. We can be the voice of the voiceless. So
Absolutely.
never be afraid to reach out. And on that note, I'm going to hit the outro.
Take care.
Thanks for squatching, everybody.
Squatch you later.